You assume love unites two beings. You imagine it as harmony, as closeness that preserves both sides. Yet Shams Tabrizi questioned this certainty. He said true love does not connect, it dissolves. It does not preserve identity. It erases it. What you call relationship, he called resistance, because as long as two remain, love has not fulfilled its purpose. To Shams, love was the power that destroyed boundaries, not through violence, but through realization. It was the unveiling of what was never divided. You want love to keep you safe within yourself. But what if real love begins only when there is no self left to protect? If love destroys the lines that define you, what remains when those lines are gone? You think of love as continuity, a way to be yourself while being close to another. You equate it with belonging, recognition, and safety. You want to be seen without losing form. But Shams observed that such love is not freedom. It is subtle control. You love so long as your boundaries remain intact, as long as the other confirms your identity. This is affection built on fear, devotion built on self-preservation. You hold on and call it care. But if your love depends on the survival of the self, can it ever reveal the truth that lies beyond selfhood? For Shams Tabrizi, love was not emotion. It was transformation. It did not decorate life. It unmade it. He called the ordinary forms of love shadows of a deeper truth. In divine love, the self that says, "I love," begins to dissolve. Awareness no longer seeks to own or to be owned. It becomes the movement through which the real recognizes itself. Shams taught that love's fire consumes everything that is false, leaving only what cannot be divided. He asked, if your love leaves you unchanged, if it does not dissolve the center from which you claim to love, then what has truly happened? You define yourself through thought, a collection of memories, preferences, and fears. You call this enclosure identity and defend it as truth. Yet Shams would ask, who built this enclosure? You did, in fear of being overwhelmed. The mind draws lines to feel safe, but these same lines create the illusion of separation. You imagine others across those boundaries, and you call that imagination reality. Love, then, becomes the meeting of two constructs. But what if there are no real boundaries at all? Only the habit of thinking there must be. If the self is only an idea, can it ever truly meet another? You fear exposure because you equate it with loss. You want to open only where you remain in control. But Shams saw vulnerability not as danger, but as transparency, the state in which truth can finally be seen. When your defenses fall, awareness no longer divides experience into me and you. What was hidden behind structure becomes simple and immediate. The mind calls this breaking. Shams called it clarity. To be vulnerable is not to lose strength, but to lose concealment. If love makes you fragile, perhaps it is not destroying you, only what was never real to begin with. Shams built his teaching on the insight that being is one. All apparent distinctions, self and other, lover and beloved, exist only in perception, not in reality. Love is the movement through which the one becomes aware of itself within multiplicity. When duality dissolves, only awareness remains, complete, indivisible, self-knowing. In that clarity, the question, who loves, no longer applies because the subject and object have merged into a single act of recognition. Shams taught that this is why divine love feels like death to the self. It is not destruction of life, but the disappearance of illusion. If there is no two, can love still be spoken of at all? You want union, but only if you can survive it. You want to merge, yet remain distinguishable. You desire the infinite, but not at the cost of individuality. This is the final tension of the seeker, to reach the edge of self, but refuse to cross. Shams called this hesitation the last veil. The lover must die before dying, not physically, but conceptually. The self that clings to its name cannot experience truth. You fear disappearance because you mistake it for nothingness. But Shams said, what vanishes is not being, only separation. Are you afraid of losing yourself, or of discovering you never existed as you thought? Shams's practice was not about feeling more. It was about perceiving differently. He taught that love begins when thought ceases to measure. As long as the mind calculates distance and worth, it cannot know what unity means. His hidden practice was simple awareness, perceiving without division. When you stop naming and comparing, you discovered that awareness itself is love. It does not move toward anything. It already contains everything. Shams said the true lover does not look for the beloved. He sees only the real. In that seeing, the idea of two disappears. Can perception itself be the purest act of love? You think love grows deeper through possession, through belonging and claim. But ownership is fear disguised as devotion. It says, I must hold this or I will vanish. Shams taught that such attachment arises from forgetting who you are. The self that clings imagines loss because it imagines separation. When you see that there is no mine apart from the real, the need to hold disappears. What remains is freedom without distance, presence without control. Love that owns nothing lacks nothing. Can you imagine a love that gives completely because it no longer knows who is giving or receiving? When the self's boundaries collapse, awareness stands without division. Shams called this the mirror of the real, not an image, but a state of unbroken recognition. Here, love is not an action or relation. It is being itself. The lover and beloved dissolve into the same awareness that was always there. Nothing has been gained, yet everything false has disappeared. Love reveals not another, but the absence of otherness. This was Shams's hidden practice, to let love undo perception until only truth remains. What then? Does love destroy except illusion? And what could it reveal but the unity that was never lost? When all boundaries dissolve, there is no longer motion between two poles. The search ends not in excitement but in clarity. You no longer seek love because you recognize that you were never outside it. Shams said the final stage is peace, not rest from effort, but the absence of division. Awareness does not reach outward or fold inward. It simply is. This stillness is not emptiness but completeness. Nothing remains to pursue and nothing remains apart. Can there be intimacy greater than this? Not between two beings, but within the undivided truth of being itself. The journey began with a question. Does love connect or dissolve? It ends with understanding that connection was never needed. Shams Tabriz's hidden practice reveals that love's highest act is destruction, not of life, but of separation. Love does not join two. It unveils the one reality that was always whole. The boundaries you feared to lose were ideas, not truths. What remains when they fall is awareness, borderless, self-sufficient, and real. This is the love that destroys boundaries, not through passion, but through seeing. In that seeing, there is no lover, no beloved, only the one that was never divided. The movement of this reflection begins with attachment. and ends with dissolution. You start by believing that love preserves your identity. You end by realizing that identity was the only obstacle. Shams Tabrizi taught that love is not an emotion but a perception, the recognition that nothing stands apart. Its destruction is mercy, its fire is understanding. Through it, thought ceases to divide the world into self and other, and awareness rests in its original unity. The listener who follows this path arrives at stillness, not sentiment, at the quiet recognition that there is no distance to close, no one to reach, and nothing to hold. Love, in truth, has never known boundaries at all.